Trump announced this morning, "We will unleash hell if Iran does not agree to a deal." The White House is increasing its threats while Tehran rejects the American proposal. So is the agreement between Iran and the United States heading towards an explosion? Right now, it seems that the Revolutionary Guards want the crown jewel. And all the signs point to the Pentagon preparing for a deep move inside Iran. At the same time, Iran is strengthening its defenses on Kharg Island to prepare for a possible American invasion. And meanwhile, American and Israeli strikes continue without pause. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was not surprised by Trump's statement about negotiations with Iran. Later, when the White House published the document detailing the American demands to Iran, it also became clear why. We will soon review the entire diplomatic move by the United States versus Iran. So is Pakistan mediation just a delaying tactic? Is Trump considering a move that could change the Middle East? Write us in the comments what you think will happen. A ceasefire with Iran? Iran's once tolerant neighbor is no longer willing to tolerate the Revolutionary Guards. And yesterday, a clear and unequivocal demand came from the United Arab Emirates. Dismantle Iran's capabilities, do not settle for compromise, and they said in an official statement that they cannot allow Iran to hold them hostage. And Wall Street closed higher amid hopes for a ceasefire between the United States and Iran. We will soon bring you all the details. I'm Mati Shoshani, bringing you the full truth about what's happening in Israel and everything that is heating up in our neighborhood, the Middle East. We're opening day 27 of Roaring Lion, or by its American name, Operation Epic Fury. Over the last 24 hours, the Israeli Air Force has been striking Iran at a faster pace. Overnight, the Israeli Air Force struck facilities for the production of cruise missiles in Iran. In addition, for the fourth time in the last 24 hours, the IDF has struck in Isfahan. The focus of the strikes in Iran has shifted from regime institutions to military infrastructure. After weeks of bombing Basij forces and security bodies in an attempt to undermine the regime, the center of gravity has shifted. And the goal now is to block military recovery in the medium and long term. The Air Force struck in the Isfahan area, and one of the targets was the Center for Research and Development of Underwater Military Systems. The meaning of all of this? The IDF is dealing a dramatic blow to Iran's ability to produce submarines. Negotiations between Iran and the United States. Is it true that Trump is talking about negotiations and even about a ceasefire? But in reality, the versions from the two sides contradict each other, and the war continues at the same pace at which it began. Despite the large gaps between the sides, the United States wants to continue negotiations with Iran on ending the war. At the very same time, the American administration is also preparing for a possible collapse of the talks and is sending thousands of more troops to the region. But Iran rejected the very generous American proposal to end the fighting and determined that it would end it only on its own terms. In Tehran, they laid out 5 conditions, accused Washington of deception, and made it abundantly clear the strikes will continue. The United States is demanding an end to uranium enrichment, the destruction of the nuclear facilities, restrictions on the missile program, and the abandonment of its proxies in the Middle East. And in return, Iran will receive sanctions relief and civilian nuclear program. We'll soon bring you all the American demands in the ceasefire agreement. The White House spokeswoman said yesterday that if Iran does not understand that it has been defeated, Trump is ready to bring hell upon it. US President Trump said in recent hours, Iran very much wants a deal, but they are afraid to say it. Trump also added, they're afraid their own people will kill them. They're afraid we will kill them. There has never been a world leader who wanted the job less than those leading Iran, said the US president today in a speech at the Republican Party fundraising event. So as I said, alongside the statements about talks with Iran, the military preparation continues, and suspicion is growing that this is a strategy of deception. And in Israel, we assess that further escalation in the Strait of Hormuz and in other arenas is still very much on the table. It appears that Iran has prepared traps and moved military personnel and air defense systems to Kharg Island in order to prepare for a possibility of an American capture of the island. Sources in the Revolutionary Guards threatened that an American attempt to seize control would involve high risks for US military forces. But classified briefings are raising concern in Congress and point to the possibility of a ground military move soon on Iranian soil. The concern is that the Iranians will try to kidnap American soldiers. Meanwhile, the Iranian people are living with a sense of suffocation. Awake between the missile cities and Iran and their own poverty, the people's anger is deepening. There's a rage in Iran over the regime's priorities. Citizens are attacking the regime because money was directed to military projects instead of education, healthcare, and welfare. The Revolutionary Guards have made the Iranian people miserable for the sake of missiles. And what is behind the dramatic appointment in Iran? The Revolutionary Guards forced Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian to appoint Muhammad Baghdad Zolkader as a replacement for Ali Larijani as head of Iran's Supreme National Security Council. And is Putin coming to the aid of the Iranians? Will Putin's deadly weapon that is on its way to Iran succeed in saving the Ayatollah regime? Russia is nearing completion of a shipment of deadly drones, including advanced technology, to Iran alongside humanitarian assistance. This is all meant to strengthen and stabilize the Ayatollah regime. And is Saudi Arabia on the way to losing Iran? The long-standing confrontation between Iran and Saudi Arabia is religious, economic, and strategic. And in the current war, it has become direct and painful. Iran is acting forcefully and striking, while Saudi Arabia is cautious, defensive, and avoiding a decisive move. The IDF continues its ground maneuver in Lebanon, alongside the daily firing of dozens of Hezbollah rockets towards Israel. In fact, from my tally, it was 60 up to this moment today. The day before yesterday, 2 terrorists from Hezbollah's elite unit surrendered to the Givati soldiers in southern Lebanon. Israel opposes bringing Hezbollah into the negotiation with Iran. We've said we will not allow this connection in Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, they identify panic among Hezbollah and are determined to use powerful military forces to disarm it. Naim Qassem, the head of Hezbollah, said that Hezbollah will not surrender, and that, from their point of view, the war will continue without limit. Today, Hezbollah's Secretary General attacks Israel and the United States, and he also rejects negotiations during wartime. London under pressure. Police returned to acting against supporters of an anti-Israeli organization. And despite a dramatic legal ruling, London police decided to tighten enforcement and continue arresting activists from an extreme anarchist pro-Palestinian organization. It is still a criminal offense to support the organization, they said. Well, there is a lot ahead of us. Let's dive into the details. So let's start. I'm Mati Shoshani, and Yael Pinto, who's usually with me, is off today on vacation. As you can see, I'm bringing you boots on the ground live, the news report that brings you the full truth about what is happening in Israel. This, guys, is day 27 of the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. And just before we begin, I want to call on you to keep spreading the truth, share our content with as many people as possible, and most importantly, don't forget to press the subscribe button. And if you want to see life in Israel under war through our eyes, just search for Mati Shoshani, that's me, or Yael Pinto on social media, and make sure to follow us. So what is really happening in Kharg Island? Kharg Island, as you might recall, is the oil island for the Iranians. It is a small island off the shore of Iran that has a deep water port that allows the mega oil tankers to come quickly alongside, be filled with oil, and move on quickly on their way to bring in more petrodollars for the Iranian regime. This small island has seen multiple attacks by the Israeli regime and the American forces, but they have not destroyed the oil production facilities. Now, in many people's mind right now is a huge question, the question of, will the US have boots on the ground in Kharg Island? Why is that important? Because Kharg Island is the lifeline for the Iranian economy. Hear this, even during this war, even as the Iranians fire ballistic missiles on Israel, as they fire ballistic missiles on their Gulf state neighbors, they continue to sell oil. Yes, you heard me right. The Iranians are still making money every day selling oil to their allies. Who are their allies? the Chinese, the Indians, several other countries in that part of the world who are all buying Iran's oil. They're buying it at a reduction of the full price, but still pumping money into Iran's quickly dwindling bank accounts. So why is this important? The United States have threatened to bring boots on the ground, and not only they're threatening to do that, they're also acting alongside those exact lines. President Trump might say that they're negotiating, but we're not only negotiating. There is also a continuation of the firepower being used against the Iranians and a substantial threat on the table, which is the presence and the mobilization of multiple units that can have boots on the ground in Iran. One of these units is the 82nd Airborne Unit, a quick deployment, rapid deployment unit that may be the people that are used to have boots on the ground in Kharg Island or other strategic facilities. And there are several other forces of Marine, let's call them expeditionary forces, that are on their way with everything that it takes for a quick deployment of forces on the ground. What do these people have? They have the landing craft, the amphibious assault vehicles that are needed. They have the logistical support. They have the command and control units and personnel in place to maneuver and control such an attack. And they have all the aerial assets, the ground assets, and importantly, the troops to carry out such an attack against Iranian facilities. What could this mean? This could mean that the US would hold on to key points on the Iranian coastline, safeguarding passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, and importantly, also hold on to one of the most valuable, expensive, and cash-producing assets in the Iranian regime, the Kharg Island oil facilities. What does that mean? Literally, it means a chokehold on the neck of the Iranian financial machine. It means that they start running out of cash and the clock starts ticking for the day where they don't have money to pay salaries, buy food, or keep the machine that is the IRGC and the Ayatollah regime running. And this is important because this isn't happening alone. In the same vacuum of the question of whether or not the US will have boots on the ground, Israel, together with the United States, is closing off another of the smuggling routes that the Iranians use. That is the northern route. Through that northern route, in the northern part of Iran, the Iranians have been smuggling in, listen to this, food, weaponry, chemicals, and weapon systems, part of them supplied by the Russian government to keep the war effort going. There's one more piece here. Up till now, the US has not done two big things that are substantial levers of influence on the Iranians. They have not put boots on the ground, which is an option that might happen. And we know this as a threat. The US government, the Trump White House, have clearly said that the US may use this as a weapon against the Iranian regime if the talks don't materialize, if the Iranians keep dragging their feet in this negotiation. But there's another thing. The US has yet, at the order of President Trump, not fully stopped the travel of maritime vessels through the Strait of Hormuz that are tied to the Iranian government. What are these, you ask? These are oil tankers by the Iranian regime that are going to, as I said, China, India, and other countries, and bringing in quick cash for the Iranian regime. These are other ships that are paying a $2 million per ship ransom to the Iranian regime to pass through the Strait of Hormuz unharmed. Not American ships, not Israeli ships, not European ships for the most part, but yes, quite a few of the Asian vessels that are afraid to go through without paying a $2 million per ship ransom to the Iranian regime. And there's one more piece. There's the incoming maritime trade. Chinese vessels that are bringing in the important chemicals that are needed to, listen when I say this, to fuel the ballistic missiles coming out of Iran. So there's still a substantial logistical chain, still a substantial financial mechanism that can be used against the Iranian regime when the President of the United States decides to do so. So when the Iranians say that they laugh in the face of the President of the US, when they say that they don't need to negotiate, that they're not afraid of the threats of the US and the Israeli government, they still have a lot to lose in the shape and sense of troops on the ground that take over some of their most valuable assets and cutting off the life supply arteries that keep the Iranian regime pumping and going to see another day. Keep spreading the truth, share our content, and follow me, Mati Shoshani, and Yair Pinto on social media to see life in Israel under war through our eyes. That's the best way to catch up with what's happening. Now let's go for our shout out for today. Let me speak to you for a moment, heart to heart. Right now, as Israel stands under the shadow of threats, even from Iran, this story isn't just about war. It's about people, families who wake up every morning and choose to build, to plant, to believe, even when it's hard. That's what Blessed by Israel is all about. It's about families like the Atidias in the Jordan Valley, who took barren desert and with their own hands turned it into life. Trees, fruit, a future for their 7 children. And families like the Furchtwagners in the Judean hills, what a name, caring for their bees, bringing sweetness back to the land of milk and honey, helping Israel bloom once more. And when you support them, you're not just buying olive oil or honey. You're saying, I see you, I stand with you, you are not alone, so don't wait. Go right now to blessedbyisrael.com/stand. Again, that's blessedbyisrael.com/stand. Be part of something bigger than yourself. Stand with the families of Israel, stand with this land, stand with the story that is still being written. Blessedbyisrael.com/stand. This is your moment. Sirens were heard again this morning in central Israel and in Jerusalem, after almost 14 hours of relative quiet. A short time later, an impact was also recorded in an industrial zone in the Negev, southern Israel, with damages but no injuries. And the question now, hanging over day 27 of the Roaring Lion War, or Epic Fury, is whether this renewed fire is meant only to preserve pressure, or whether it is a screen behind which a deeper move is now being built, military and political, one that could change the entire Middle East. This is the moment when you have to look at all the fronts together, at what is happening in the skies over Israel, and what's happening in Isfahan and Mashhad, and what is being quietly built around Kharg Island, and what Trump is saying in public, and what the Pentagon is actually doing. And at the gap that keeps growing between talk of an agreement and a war that is continuing at almost full pace. Let's begin with what is most urgent right now in the region, the danger that the Strait of Hormuz could turn from a field of threat into an actual battlefield. The Iranians are no longer hiding the importance they attach to this route. For them, it is the main lever of power against the world. It is no accident that in Tehran, they're already defining it as the jewel in the crown. That is also why one of the 5 demands Iran placed in front of the Americans, the American proposal, is international recognition of its right to control the Strait of Hormuz. From the regime's point of view, this is not a detail in the negotiations. This is the heart of the story. Against that, Washington is building clear military pressure. The US Navy is working to return to the Middle East 2 mine countermeasure ships currently docked in Singapore for maintenance. It may seem like a small detail, but it says a great deal. When America starts moving mine-clearing vessels, it's not thinking only about next strike. It's thinking about the possibility that Iran has already prepared the arena for the closure or disruption of shipping lanes. That concern grows even stronger in light of the reports that the Iranians have mined areas around Kharg and moved additional air defense systems and forces there. Kharg Island itself has now become one of the most sensitive points in the war. It is Iran's oil island, its economic oxygen line, and according to assessments leaked in the United States, the administration is considering the possibility of using ground forces to seize it, not as a symbolic occupation, but as leverage that would force Tehran to reopen Hormuz. And in Iran, they understood this very well. That's why they reinforced the island with additional surface-to-air missile systems, anti-personnel mines, anti-armor mines, and traps along the coastline. Some assessments say the Iranians are even preparing for the scenario of an American amphibious landing. And this brings in the next question. Does Trump really want an agreement? Or is he preparing the ground for another stage in the campaign? In public, the White House talks, about contacts, about an American proposal, about a window that will still remain open. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said that if Iran does not understand that it was defeated, Trump is ready to bring hell down on it. At the same time, she also insisted that the talks are continuing and that they are productive. Trump himself said that Iran very much wants an agreement, but is afraid to say so. He added that the Iranians are afraid of their own people and are also afraid that the Americans will kill them. Then he said simply, which is very interesting in my mind, there was no choice but to go to war with Iran, and we are going to finish this. But beneath that language, a very clear force buildup continues. More than 2,000 Marines are already on their way to the region. Additional forces are joining them, including the deployment of soldiers from the 82nd Airborne Division. Classified briefings given to members of Congress in the United States raised concern over the scenario of a ground operation. 3 senior Republicans made clear after those briefings that the administration didn't provide full answers to the central questions. One of them said explicitly that she would not support sending ground forces into Iran. Another warned against yet another endless war. The very tone of this tells us that this is not just media talk. In Congress, they smell a deeper preparation. Now, on the Iranian side, the response is no less combative. Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf warned that any regional country that helps an American move against Kharg will see its vital infrastructure become a target. At the same time, Iranian media are already speaking openly about the possibility of capturing American soldiers if they enter the territory. This isn't a slogan. It is part of the operational concept of the Revolutionary Guards. And in Tehran, they understand that an American ground operation, even a limited one, creates for them an opportunity to produce a humiliating image of Washington through the killing or kidnapping of soldiers. That's why part of the internal discourse there in Iran presents an American invasion as an event that could turn the battlefield in Iran's favor. Above all this hovers the gap between words and actions. The Iranians say there is no negotiation. The White House says there are negotiations. Iran's mediators. The Americans insist that the talks are continuing. An Iranian official already admitted that the initial response to the American proposal was not positive, but added that Tehran is still examining it. In other words, there is no breakthrough here. There's a game of nerves, and each side is trying to buy time without looking like the one that blinks first. And meanwhile, the American proposal itself is becoming clearer and clearer. The demands passed through mediators include stopping uranium enrichment on Iranian soil, destroying the nuclear facilities, transferring the enriched uranium, placing limits on ballistic missile stockpiles and their range, and abandoning the regional proxies. And in return, Iran would receive sanctions relief, the non-activation of an additional sanctions mechanism, and civilian nuclear technology. This is not a narrow proposal. It is an attempt to dismantle almost the entire architecture of the regime's threat. That's also why it's not surprising that Tehran rejected this proposal almost immediately. From the Iranian point of view, and this is important to note to explain, these are excessive, unreasonable, and even misleading demands. Iranian officials compared the move to previous rounds of talks that they described as deception. The Iranian message is clear. If there is to be an end to the war, it will be only on Iran's terms and on Iran's timetable. Tehran also presented 5 conditions of its own: a complete halt to strikes and assassinations, mechanisms to prevent a renewal of the war, compensation, an end to the fighting on all fronts of the resistance, and recognition of its right to the Strait of Hormuz. And that brings us to the Israeli point of view. In Jerusalem, they did not buy this diplomatic picture. Netanyahu, according to the reports, ordered that in the next 48 hours, every effort to be made to destroy as much of Iran's weapon industry as humanly possible. That order did not come by chance. It came after the American 15-point proposal was received. In other words, in Israel, we understand that if a negotiation window opens, it must be reached after maximum damage to Iran's ability to rebuild itself. And that is exactly what is happening in the air. In the past 24 hours, the Israeli Air Force has increased its pace. Facilities for producing cruise missiles in Iran were attacked, and at the same time, the IDF struck again and again in Isfahan, up to the 4th time within a single day. But the issue here is not only the number of waves, it is a shift in the center of gravity. After weeks in which the focus was on regime institutions, the Basij headquarters, and security bodies, the emphasis is now moving to the military infrastructure itself. The goal is not only to strike. The goal is to block military recovery in the medium and long term. One of the most important targets struck in Isfahan was the Center for Research and Development of Underwater Military Systems. This is the only site in Iran responsible for the planning and development of submarines and support systems for the Iranian Navy. According to the published information, the regime also produced there a range of unmanned naval vessel models. This strike significantly damages Iran's ability to produce new submarines, upgrade the existing fleet, and build an advanced naval force for the day after. It is a quieter target than a ballistic missile, but in the long term, it is a very strategic one. Not only there, documentation was also published showing extensive damage to Basij and Revolutionary Guard headquarters, ballistic missile production sites, and development complexes of Iran's air defense industry. In one case, it was reported that a central ballistic missile production site was completely destroyed. In others, research and development centers were documented as having been put out of action. And if you connect all of these together, you see an orderly campaign, a strike on the production chain, the command structure, and the research, not only on individual launcher in the field. The United States is also continuing in the same direction. CENTCOM, or Central Command, Admiral Brad Cooper, announced that the American military has already struck 10,000 targets in Iran since the beginning of the operation. And according to him, 92% of the Iranian Navy has been destroyed already. Missile and drone launchers have dropped by 90%, and 2/3 of the production infrastructure for missiles, drones, naval platforms, and shipyards has been damaged or destroyed. He stressed explicitly, we're not finished yet. In other words, despite all the talk of contacts, on the operational level, there is no slowdown. There's also a very interesting detail that explains something about the White House itself. Trump, according to reports in the United States, receives every day a video briefing of about 2 minutes, made up of the most significant, largest, and most successful strikes from the past 48 hours. One source who described it called it a series of videos of things exploding. 2 other sources said this has raised concern among some close to him that the president is not getting the full picture. If that report is true, it may explain why Trump sometimes sounds as though he has already reached the finish line while the ground continues to burn. At the same time as the Iranian arena, Lebanon remains a completely hot front. Since this morning, Hezbollah has launched around 100 rockets and drones towards communities in the north. Yesterday, more than 60 rockets were launched, some towards the Haifa and Krayot area, some towards Acre and Haria, and some others towards the Upper Galilee. And during the night, several missiles launched towards the center were also intercepted. And while the fire continues, the IDF is continuing its ground maneuver in Lebanon. There, the IDF is operating along 3 lines. The first, defense of the northern communities and pushing the fire capability away. The second, the Litani line, which is a well-known river up there, including strikes on bridges, evacuation of the population, and demilitarization of the area. And the third, all of Lebanon, including Dakhiyeh, which is an area outside of the city, and the economic arena of Hezbollah and the Iranian intermediaries. Division 36 is operating in the Ramim Ridge, in Ataibe, Bar'aba Taltin, and the area of Al-Khiyam. Division 162 is expected to join. According to the published figures, around 700 Hezbollah terrorists have been eliminated so far. Just the day before yesterday, 2 terrorists from the organization's elite unit even surrendered to Givati soldiers in southern Lebanon. This is an unusual detail, and it also points to the depth of the pressure in parts of the field. And inside of all of this, Naim Qassem, the head of Hezbollah, understands his problem very well. On the one hand, he declares that Hezbollah will not surrender and that the war will continue without limit. On the other hand, in Israel, they identify growing panic inside the organization. The understanding in Hezbollah is that Iran may reach an understanding with the Americans, but leave Lebanon open to Israel. That is why in Jerusalem, they're making it clear. We will not allow that connection. We will not allow an equation in which launches from Lebanon stop only if the fighting against Hezbollah stops. The Israeli line demands a complete severing of the operational and political linkage between Tehran and Beirut. Iran, on the other hand, is trying to do exactly the opposite. It has informed mediators that Lebanon must be part of any deal. Hezbollah, according to those same reports, even received Iranian guarantees that it would be included in any broader agreement. In the eyes of the organization, such a regional ceasefire could help it survive and even restore its political standing in Lebanon. Now, in Israeli eyes, this all is a red line. There is another regional line that is finding it harder and harder to hide itself, the Gulf states. For instance, the United Arab Emirates broke with its usual careful language this time. The Emirati ambassador in Washington said plainly that compromises or a ceasefire is not enough. He demanded an unequivocal result. And according to him, Iran has launched more than 2,100 missiles and drones towards the Emirates, more than towards any other country. The Emirates intercept more than 95% of the threats, but say openly that this is not enough. From their point of view, it is necessary to deal not only with a nuclear issue, but also with missiles, with drones, with proxies, and the blocking of shipping routes. This is an important message because it shows that Israel is no longer alone in demanding the deeper dismantling of Iranian capabilities. Facing that stands Saudi Arabia, large, wealthy, but still hesitant. This war has exposed just how difficult it is for Riyadh to turn resources into effective strategic power. Iran attacked Saudi Arabia directly. It struck at oil facilities. It tried to hit airports, bases, and energy infrastructure. The Saudis intercepted, absorbed, were cautious, but avoided decisive action. And in other words, Iran acts, Saudi Arabia manages risk. And that changes the entire balance of power in the region. Into this picture also enter two additional directions. One is internal inside Iran. More and more Iranian voices on social media are attacking the regime over its priorities. The underground missile cities, the huge tunnels built with public money, are now being presented not only as military achievements, but as a symbol of poverty, neglect, and the suffocating feeling of the citizens. Iranians are writing that with the money that should have gone to education, healthcare, and welfare, went instead to missiles and tunnels. One wrote that the dream of a normal life was sacrificed for military projects. Another said they made the people miserable for the sake of the missiles. This is not an uprising, but it is certainly an indication of pressure building beneath the surface. The second direction is Moscow. According to the reports, Russia is nearing the completion of a shipment of lethal drones, food, and medication to Iran. Not S-400 systems, but more advanced drone technology. Improvements in engines, navigation, and anti-jamming capabilities. The Iranians do not need hundreds more simple tools. They want better tools, more accurate, more resilient to electronic warfare. And if that shipment is completed by the end of March, it will not save the regime immediately, but it could help it improve the next generation of the threat. Now, within this whole picture, London seems far away, but not disconnected. The police there decided to continue acting against supporters of an extremist anti-Israel organization, despite the legal complexity that arose. This is another sign that this war is no longer being fought only between bases, ports, and tunnels. It is also projecting into the streets of Europe, into politics, and into the question of how Western countries will deal with the radicalization growing around the campaign. This is day 27, and what we're seeing now is not the calm before the end, but parallel movements on two tracks. On one track, they talk about contacts, mediators, and proposals. On the second track, Israel and the United States continue to strike the military industries, the Navy, the missiles, the shipyards, the headquarters, and Iran's ability to recover. Above them hovers Kharg Island. Below them, Lebanon and the northern front are burning. And around them, the entire Gulf is holding its breath. This war is not entering a stage of conclusion. It is entering the stage in which every diplomatic word is tested against ships, marines, mines, and deep target. Is Trump really looking for an agreement? Or is he only playing with the Iranians before the next blow? I'm Mati Shoshani. Search for me and Yael Pinto on social media to see the war through our eyes, straight from Israel. And give us a like, and don't forget, of course, to subscribe and press that button so you stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss boots on the ground. Guys, as we end, I want to ask you, as always, to pray for the people of Israel. Pray for the safety of the people of Israel. Pray for our men and women in uniform, both Israeli and American, who are fighting this just and important war in this region. And lastly, of course, pray for the people in Iran to be removed from the disease of the Ayatollah regime and see freedom, liberties, and the life that the Iranian people deserve. A good, historical, ancient nation that deserves better than the kidnapping by the Ayatollah regime. And if you're not yet praying on a regular daily basis, this is your wake-up call. You need to be praying for Israel. You need to be praying for what God has done in this region. God bless you all, and I'll see you on the next broadcast.